All right, so moving on to the next segment, we're gonna pivot over here to the world of MMA inside the UFC world, and I'll be sharing my UFC Fight Night summary between Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker. So in the main event of UFC Fight Night in Qatar yesterday, we seen Arman Tsarukyan defeat Dan Hooker by second round submission in the main event of UFC Fight Night in Qatar. So I'll be sharing my thoughts on the fight that took place at lightweight between these two respective fighters. Honestly, it was a great overall performance by Arman Tsarukyan defeating Dan Hooker last night in the main event of UFC Fight Night in Qatar. I mean, Arman Tsarukyan had a really good performance. It was mixed in with great counter punches when the fight was kept standing. He was dominant on the ground with gaining control time on the ground, making Dan Hooker uncomfortable, landing some damaging shots on the ground as well. And when you look at how the fight played out in the second round, he was very creative on the ground in the second round, wearing down Dan Hooker, making him become fatigued and earning that impressive second round submission victory. The triangle chokehold on the ground really made Dan Hooker very uncomfortable, and he was forced to submit. Overall, I think it was a bad matchup for Dan Hooker. Bad night in the office, obviously, but he's known for striking, and at times he couldn't get going striking, so he tried to take the ground, to fight to the ground against Arman Tsarukyan, which I didn't think was a good idea. And he was better off going with his bread and butter, trying to find success in the striking department. Tried to land some leg kicks. They were blocked and countered by Arman Tsarukyan. Really didn't go his way. And he took a lot of punishment. I mean, Arman Tsarukyan in the first round landed a damaging knee strike where I was surprised Dan Hooker's chin held up where he didn't get dropped to the canvas. Took a brutal knee shot. I think the accidental headbutt that happened in the first round as well opened up Dan Hooker, or had the it did open him up, and he had the nasty injury to his eye, which really wasn't great for him as the fight went on. So he took a lot of damaging shots. But yeah, he couldn't find any success with the striking. Definitely the leg kicks weren't capitalizing the way that he thought they could, and Arman Tsarukyan just sent a strong message to the lightweight division. And now Arman Tsarukyan is actually tied for the second most lightweight wins in the division since 2019. I think he's tied at 10 with Islam Makhachev, and the record right now is held by Charles Oliveira, who has 11 victories at lightweight since 2019. So he's one behind the great Charles Oliveira, who he did defeat at UFC 300 back in the spring of 2024. So Arman Tsarukyan, everything's looking great for him. He's still the #1 ranked contender at the lightweight division, and of course he's still going to be the #1 contender at the lightweight division once the rankings come out Monday morning by the UFC executives, because he's still on a hot streak and just had an impressive performance against Dan Hooker. So what's next for Arman Tsarukyan? I think he clearly deserves a title shot. Arman Tsarukyan definitely deserves a title shot next at lightweight. He's been the #1 contender in the UFC rankings for a little bit. 2 impressive victories the last 2 times we've seen him in the octagon against Charles Oliveira back at UFC 300, and just made Dan Hooker submit in the main event of UFC Fight Night in Qatar. So Arman Tsarukyan, he's been up and down, and it's been one hell of a ride for him. He got suspended for the majority of 2024. Pulled out 48 hours or less than 48 hours ahead of his championship fight against Islam Makhachev that he had scheduled in January earlier in the year for a light heavyweight championship title shot. And Dana White basically put him on ice after that, was really pissed off. But honestly, guys, I think Justin Gaethje is going to have to move to the side after that impressive performance that Arman Tsarukyan just had against Dan Hooker. He's got 2 impressive victories in his last 2 outings. How is that not deserving of a title shot? I think, honestly, Ilia Topuria and Arman Tsarukyan is a 50-50 fight, more competitive fight. Styles makes fights. Both are good strikers. Both are good grapplers. That's a more compelling and entertaining fight than what Ilia Topuria and Justin Gaethje would give us right now. I think that's a 70-30 fight compared to a 50-50 fight that we could possibly get. And I honestly think Ilia Topuria finishes off Justin Gaethje by knockout or submission victory within the first round or so if they match up against each other for the lightweight title early 2026. So in my perfect world, I think Arman Tsarukyan deserves a title shot next. I would possibly give Justin Gaethje someone like Paddy Pimblett, who is rising up in the lightweight division. He might be top 5 He's either the 5th or 6th ranked contender right now in the UFC. Got to double check on that. But I think that's a more compelling fight right now for Justin Gaethje. There's no disrespect to him. I've already said how I felt about him on the podcast. He's a future UFC Hall of Famer. One of the best fighters to never win a UFC world title. Former interim champion, of course, but never became a world champion. But I just think Justin Gaethje just needs to do more, in my opinion, to get a title shot against Ilia Topuria next, compared to the man that's been #1 for a little bit and would have got a title shot against Islam Makhachev if he wasn't injured. And he did have 2 impressive victories against Justin Gaethje and Dan Hooker. 2 of the baddest guys, some of the baddest guys that the lightweight division currently has to offer. So if I was booking the lightweight division, in my perfect world, I would have Ilia Topuria versus Arman Tsarukyan next for the lightweight championship. I would go in the direction of Justin Gaethje fighting Paddy Pimblett next. And then for the BMF title, I would have Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira next. In my perfect world, that's how I would book the lightweight division for the UFC. But we'll see how things play out. But I think Arman Tsarukyan is definitely deserving of a title shot next. But that is my UFC Fight Night main event summary between Arman Tsarukyan and Dan Hooker.